The sun poured through the stained glass of Manila Cathedral like golden honey, creating colorful patterns on the cold marble floor. Faithful arrived in silent waves, filling the dark wooden pews polished by decades of prayers and bent knees. The century-old building breathed incense and expectation, while the choir rehearsed notes that floated like timid birds through the vaulted ceiling. Amara Diokno remained motionless in the last row, hands clasped on her lap, eyes fixed on her worn shoes that contrasted with the immaculate floor. Her thin body seemed to want to merge with the shadows, disappear among the columns. The 22-year-old had traveled 3 days by sea and land from her village in Mozambique, with nothing but a tattered backpack and a promise made to her dying grandmother. Around her, golden-skinned Filipinos cast curious glances, some brief, others lingering. A dark spot in a painting of soft tones. The murmur grew like a rising tide, fragmented words reaching her ears. Foreigner, different, place. Amara shrank further, hugging her bag like a shield. The clock advanced slowly, each minute stretching like rubber. The cathedral now overflowed with worshippers, all in their Sunday best, expensive perfumes mixing with incense. No one sat next to Amara, creating an island of emptiness around her, a perfect circle of isolation in an ocean of communion. The first note from the organ shook the walls, making Amara's heart leap. She had arrived. She was finally there, at the mass her grandmother Esperanca had described so many times in nighttime stories, in the cathedral where a holy man had healed her faith decades ago. A solitary tear ran down the young woman's face, tracing a bright path on her skin dark as polished ebony. Makoe Reyes adjusted the radio on his belt and stretched his neck, observing the crowd with eyes trained to detect anomalies. 15 years as cathedral security had given him a sixth sense. Something always seemed out of place on Sundays. Forgotten wallets, lost children, occasionally a disturbed person seeking shelter. Today, his eyes found Amara immediately, like a hawk spotting a different animal among the familiar ones. His posture changed imperceptibly, shoulders tensing under his starched navy blue uniform. Makoe had seen beggars trying to enter before, people seeking alms among the faithful, disturbing the sanctity of the place. The girl didn't look like a beggar, but she didn't seem to belong either. Her curly hair escaped from a colorful scarf. Her simple clothes contrasted with the Sunday dresses around her. The clock marked 2 minutes until the start of the celebration. Cardinal Tagle was already in the sacristy, dressing for Mass. Makoe walked silently down the side aisle, skirting the crowd like water deviating from stones in a river. His black shoes, polished until they reflected the light from the chandeliers, made no sound against the marble. He stopped 3 steps from Amara, observing her for a complete moment. His eyes did not register the hands calloused from work, nor the religious medal hanging from her thin neck, not even the lips that moved in silent prayer. They saw only what they expected to see, a potential problem, an anomaly in the perfect system that was his responsibility to maintain. The first chord of the entrance hymn began to sound, hundreds of people rising simultaneously. Makoe leaned slightly, his shadow covering Amara's face like a passing cloud blocking the sun. The words came out like polished stones, smooth on the surface but hard on impact. She would need to leave. The Mass was for registered parishioners. Capacity was full. There would be another celebration later. Amara felt the world crumble like a sandcastle under a merciless wave. The security guard's words hit her like small arrows, each finding a vulnerable place in her heart already hurt by months of mourning and 3 days of exhausting travel. Her fingers tightened around the wooden rosary hidden in her pocket, the final gift from her grandmother Esperanca, the only object that remained of her besides the stories. The man's face remained impassive, a perfect professional mask hiding any trace of emotion or hesitation. Around them, people discreetly observed the scene, some with curiosity, others with discomfort, none with intervention. Amara rose slowly, her legs trembling like leaves in the wind, as the entrance procession began to advance down the central aisle. There was no anger in her heart, only a deep sadness like a bottomless well. It wasn't the first time her dark skin created invisible walls, that her foreign origin inspired distrust. In the village, her grandmother said God saw beyond appearances, looked straight into the soul. It seemed people rarely managed the same feat. The choir sang about love and welcome while she gathered her small bag and prepared to leave. Bitter irony that dissolved in her throat like medicine without water. The weight of the unfulfilled promise weighed on her shoulders. Go to Manila, find the cathedral where I was healed, pray for my soul in the presence of the holy man with a big heart. Final words from a woman who had crossed oceans in her youth and found peace in distant lands. One tear escaped, then another, forming bright constellations on her dark face. Amara did not wipe them away. She let them fall freely, silent baptism of her suffering. With dignity inherited from generations of strong women, she turned her back to the altar and began walking toward the side door, feet heavy as if dragging invisible chains. Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle walked slowly in the entrance procession, his red vestments flowing like a river of living blood between crowded pews. His eyes, always attentive despite his serene expression, caught small details that others ignored: a restless child being calmed, an elderly person leaning on a cane, a young couple holding hands. The cardinal believed that Christ was in these details, in the margins, in the peripheries of human attention. It was then that his gaze caught the discreet movement on the side. A young woman with skin dark as a starless night slowly rising, head bowed, while Makoi, the cathedral's longest-serving security guard, stood erect beside her. The girl's body seemed to fold in on itself, like a flower closing at dusk. Something in the contrast between the two figures, rigid authority and fragile youth, created a dissonance in the cardinal's heart. The faithful continued singing, oblivious to the small drama unfolding on the periphery of the celebration. But Tagle had learned early on to see the margins, the darkened corners where candlelight didn't directly reach. In his simple childhood in Cavite, his mother always found room for one more plate at the table, even when food was scarce. "Where 10 fit, 11 fit," she would say, serving slightly smaller portions so that no one would leave hungry. The cardinal imperceptibly altered his route, deviating a few centimeters from the traditional path. No one noticed, except the most experienced altar servers who exchanged quick looks of surprise. The procession continued its course like a river that encounters a stone and gently flows around the obstacle, without breaking rhythm or harmony. The songs echoed off the century-old walls, wrapping everyone in a sonic mantle of devotion. As Amara took her third step toward the exit, a silent presence appeared at her side like a gentle shadow. A calloused hand, not from the harshness of physical labor, but from the softness of thousands of blessings given, rested lightly on her shoulder. The touch was light as a feather, yet carried the weight of a mountain in meaning. Cardinal Tagle had interrupted the solemn procession to reach her. Silence fell over the cathedral like snow over an agitated landscape. Hundreds of suspended breaths created a momentary vacuum, as if time froze in a perfect frame. Makoi stepped back once, then again, confusion and surprise dancing on his normally impassive face. The choir hesitated, notes hanging unfinished in the air, before resuming the rhythm with professional smoothness. Amara's face, marked by recent tears, slowly lifted, like a plant seeking light after a devastating storm. Her eyes met Cardinal Tagle's, gentle eyes that carried the weight of the world without losing the light of compassion. No words were exchanged, only a language older than any human tongue, the gaze that recognizes, that welcomes, that understands. Tagle smiled, small wrinkles forming at the corners of his eyes, maps of a life dedicated to smiling at the forgotten. With gentle gestures, he indicated an empty place near the altar, an area normally reserved for ecclesiastical authorities or special guests. His hand, small for a man of his moral stature, remained gently resting on Amara's shoulder, like an anchor preventing the young woman from being carried away by the current of shame. The crowd watched in respectful silence, some with wide eyes, others with smiles timidly forming at the corners of their lips. Tagle was known for unexpected gestures of kindness, unrehearsed moments that translated abstract gospels into concrete actions. Still, interrupting the solemn procession to welcome a stranger was an act that surpassed even his known demonstrations of compassion. Unhurried, as if they had all the time in the world, the cardinal guided Amara down the side aisle. Their steps synchronized naturally, as if they had walked together for years. The rosary she had been clutching tightly relaxed slightly in her fingers. The tears dried slowly on her face, leaving bright trails like rivers seen from afar. The cathedral, previously a space of exclusion, gradually transformed into a sanctuary. The Mass proceeded with its usual solemnity, but something had changed in the air, like atmospheric pressure before renewing rain. Amara, seated in the front row, seemed like a butterfly perched among flowers of a different species, belonging and not belonging simultaneously. Her hands trembled slightly as she leafed through the borrowed missal, her eyes absorbing every movement, every ritual gesture with the hunger of someone finding a feast after a long fast. Makoe remained at his post, back straight as a sentinel, but something had broken inside him. A small crack in the armor of certainties he had worn for 15 years. He watched Cardinal Tagle conduct the celebration with his usual grace, eyes occasionally resting on the foreign young woman with paternal gentleness. The security guard felt simultaneously ashamed and relieved, like a child reprimanded with love instead of anger. In the pews, discreet whispers spread like ripples on a calm lake. Phones captured images discreetly, stories being woven and shared in real time. The cardinal interrupted the procession, welcomed a refugee, defied protocol, showed the true meaning of faith, truths and half-truths mixed in a narrative that grew with each retelling, like a seed carried by the wind that finds diverse soils. Amaury Santos, a Brazilian correspondent for the International Catholic News Agency, felt the weight of the story developing before his experienced eyes. He discreetly made notes in a small worn notebook, years of religious coverage allowing him to recognize the extraordinary when it manifested in simple gestures. It wasn't the first time Tagle had demonstrated radical compassion, but there was something especially powerful in the image of the young black woman seated where normally only dignitaries had a place. Meanwhile, Amara felt as if in a lucid dream, simultaneously present and absent. The words of the liturgy, spoken in English with a distinct Filipino accent, danced around her without fully penetrating her understanding. But she understood the deeper language of symbols, of broken and shared bread, of the chalice elevated as a promise. Her grandmother Esperanca would be smiling now, she thought, as new tears, different from the earlier ones, silently formed. The moment of communion approached, faithful forming organized lines in the aisles, like human rivers converging toward an ocean of grace. Amara remained seated, uncertain, observing the familiar yet foreign ritual. In her village, Mass was celebrated with dances and drums, vibrant colors and voices raised in harmony. Here, the solemnity carried a different beauty, more contained but equally profound. Cardinal Tagle distributed the Eucharist with reverent concentration, eyes briefly meeting each person who approached, a small moment of connection amid the crowd. When he reached the row where Amara was, he made an almost imperceptible pause. With gentleness, he extended his hand to her in a silent invitation. The young woman hesitated, lips parted in an unformulated question. It was then that she took from her pocket the small object that had traveled oceans next to her heart. A rosary of dark wood, beads polished by decades of prayers and tears from her grandmother Esperanca. With trembling hands, she offered it to the cardinal as one who delivers part of their own soul. There were no words to explain, only a gesture born from the depths of her being. Tagle received the rosary with the reverence he normally reserved for sacred objects. His eyes, accustomed to reading untold stories, seemed to understand instantly. He briefly closed his eyes, holding the rosary between palms joined in silent prayer. Then, with a fluid movement born of years of liturgical practice, he blessed Amara using her own rosary, tracing a gentle cross on her forehead. The entire cathedral seemed to hold its collective breath. Amateur photographers captured the moment with varying discretion. Makoe, the security guard, felt unexpected tears forming in his normally dry eyes. Something was being healed in that instant. Not just Amara's pain, but an older and collective wound, invisible but pulsating like an exposed heart. The light from the stained glass seemed to converge at that precise point, as if the sun itself wanted to witness the moment. The Mass ended as all Masses end. Final blessing, sending forth into the world, last musical notes gradually fading. Faithful dispersed slowly, some remaining for private prayers, others gathering in small groups on the external steps. Amara remained motionless in her place, as if fearing that any movement might break the enchantment of the moment. Cardinal Tagle approached again, now without the ceremonial vestments, just a simple cassock and pectoral cross. He carried in his hands Amara's rosary, carefully rolled up. With delicate gestures, he returned it to the young woman, adding a small silver medal, Our Lady of Perpetual Help, patroness of the Philippines. They needed no common language to share the meaning of that exchange. Makoe observed from a distance, body still rigid from professional habit, but something had softened in his gaze. When Amara finally rose to leave, he approached with hesitant steps. He offered her water in a small bottle, a simple gesture that carried an unspoken request for forgiveness. She accepted with a shy smile, her first smile since arriving at the cathedral. Outside, Manila pulsed under the relentless sun. Horns, voices, life overflowing through the narrow streets. Amara descended the cathedral steps slowly, each step lighter than the previous one. The promise to her grandmother had been fulfilled in a way she never could have imagined. She now carried two blessings, the one she had come seeking and another unexpected one, born from rejection transformed into welcome. On the horizon, clouds formed promising refreshing rain after days of suffocating heat. Amara breathed deeply, filling her lungs with new air. What had happened that morning was already spreading like ripples in still water. Shared photos, told stories, touched hearts. Invisible seeds planted in fertile soil. No one could predict what fruits would be born, what flowers would bloom. Only time, the patient gardener, would reveal the complete garden. For now, it was enough to know that something had begun there, a small everyday miracle, as simple as a gaze that sees beyond appearances, as profound as compassion that transcends borders, languages, and colors. If you enjoyed this story, leave your like and subscribe to our channel.